Good everyone, we're direct with Terrie Schauer. I apologize for the delay. The technology that was working A1 for all week decided to stop working. So I apologize. Technology, intermittent technology, that's what it is. So we're continuing this series of Facebook Live today with Terrie Schauer, like I said, a successful property manager, author also of the book, The Mindful Landlord, coach at the Real Estate Investors Club as well. So Terrie, welcome.
Thank you.
So Terrie, as a property manager, how things are going right now? What's the state of your union?
Okay. So look, I would say things are quiet. Usually we have, I guess, like, a bunch of requests, a bunch of tenant demands, a bunch of things we're handling. And to be honest, the communications have been very quiet. I think people are preoccupied with other stuff. So in terms of, the volume of like usual tenant communication that we handle are like the volume of communications, which for those of us who are working from home with little kids, it's really a good thing.
Yeah.
But definitely like on the horizon, I can see that there are a couple of challenging months coming down the pipeline. So even if, we haven't had a first of the month since this crisis kind of started. So, we're going to April 1st tomorrow. So we're looking really at some challenging months, but so far things have been pretty quiet for us.
Okay. The question, what's in your crystal ball? What do you think is going to be the non-payment percentage on April 1st? What's your feeling about it?
So look, I'm projecting somewhere between 25 to 30% of tenants who are going to ask for some kind of arrangement. Leading up to April 1st, I've already had, I would say, what can I say, maybe about 10% of my tenants who have already contacted me to find out what our policy is. I'm expecting not necessarily that people are going to categorically not pay, but I'm expecting that between 25 to 30% of people are going to ask for some kind of arrangement. And then I have a bit of a game plan of how I'm going to try to influence the payment percentages of that group of people that's going to ask for help.
And obviously it's going to go down as actually the month goes by, because I think April 6th, the federal government's going to give $2,000 to people unemployed. So I guess this is going to help also with the payment. Am I correct?
Well, I mean, look, I think that's kind of a mixed bag of answers, because technically, yes, I think if the tenants want to pay their rent, I think that there is relief coming. But what's actually I find interesting is, so let's say of the tenants who have contacted me to make payment arrangements, I would say maybe 25% of those requests are actually what I would consider to be legitimate.
Okay.
Like, I feel like a lot of them are, the politicians have been saying quite loudly, don't pay your rent, the regie is closed. And I think that if anyone's been like watching local news, that information is out there. And so I think of, let's say, the group of people who is usually looking for an excuse to not pay or to pay late, they are definitely going to use that excuse.
Yeah, I guess so. Do you feel it's going to be the bad tenants that take advantage of this, or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like I said, it's always a question of percentages, right? Mm-hmm. Like, let's say of the phone calls that I've had so far, I would say I've had like 3 legitimate requests where the person actually explains to me what the problem is, and where it's like a good tenant who now for the first time has issues. So I'll give you an example. I manage a business center where we have a couple of massage therapists. And so I had one of them call me about commercial rent, and she explained, look, I haven't for the month of March. Yes, there's aid coming on this date, but imagine if I get $2,000 a month and I have to pay my own apartment, I have to pay my car, I have to make all these kind of payments. Like, basically, that's an amount of money to keep your nose above, but it's not enough money to pay commercial rent. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yep.
So, look, that's an issue, I understand. I'll give you another example. I have another apartment where it's like a colocation, And I know that all three of them were they're working restaurants. Okay, so very clearly, I understand that they're going to have a problem because like they're cut off from their source of revenue. Mm-hmm. Now, the other requests that I've had are kind of like these weird blanket things of like, we heard we don't need to pay our rent. What's your policy on that? Or we heard the government say, oh, you know, rent is on pause. So what's your company planning for that? So to me, that's a bit of like a less legitimate request in the sense that like some of my tenants, I kind of know what they do, right? Like I might know what industry they work in. If I don't, I can look on their tenant application and check it. And like, I guess this might be like the next question, but like for me, that kind of documentation and really following up on each individual person's situation, I think is going to be important, even in terms of like how we go forward dealing with like unpaid rent starting now as landlords.
You're talking about commercial also, very scary these days, huh?
Yeah,
commercial.
Very
yeah, very scary.
Yeah.
To me, just to let you know, I manage it right now. I don't ask for any rents at all because I want my business to survive, depending on the situation. But definitely, massage therapists, they cannot operate. I have hairdresser as well in one of my. I have a restaurant as well in one of my commercial units, and obviously they can't operate. So the question comes like, what's happening with the rent? So I turn to the government. I say, oh, you have some plans, you have some loans from the government, because the problem is with the landlords is that we can defer our payments, but we still have to pay the actual month. Terrie, are you there? Terrie, you're
yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
I just
okay. Yeah, connection seems to be low a little bit.
Said, like it's the video's kind of blocked.
Yeah, that's it. Can you tell me about you had some issue with some maintenance with the some maintenance of apartments, and you had some workers that have been turned around. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so like in the past days, we've started to see as like different hotspots appear in Montreal. There are certain areas where there's some control who goes in and who goes out, and verifying that it's really for you know, a legitimate reason. So I'll give you an example. My one of the people that I work with lives in Brossard, and we have some properties in Verdun. So he was coming in the morning into Verdun to repair a step. Okay, and Verdun is one of the areas that's considered to be hard hit, and they're also trying to keep, I guess, people who are off the island, they're trying to keep them off the island and let them in only for like necessary reasons. So he had a cop stop him and ask him, you know, is this why are you going into town? He was also driving a contractor truck, so I think that also like gets some attention that he might not. And so he wasn't prepared for that. So he just kind of, you know, I need to go to this building. I need to repair this step. And he didn't have like a proper answer as to what he was doing. So the cop told him to turn around and go home.
Oof. Okay. Okay. So
yeah.
so you, I guess you do prepare your staff better now with, do you need an official letter or just clear instruction?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the thing is really like even my a subcontractor really wasn't prepared for that. So, and he hadn't been watching the news. So I think he also maybe didn't know exactly how to speak to the policeman. So basically what I did after that is there's a list on the Quebec website of what is considered essential services. And basically for building, like landlords, building maintenance, janitorial work, urgent maintenance work, pest control, plumbing, those kind of things are on the list of essential services.
Okay.
And I made sure that my person had a screenshot of the list of essential services, and then management software. And in the management software, we have like work orders. So I made sure like we use it, but like sometimes, let's say I make a quick phone call and I tell someone, okay, you're going here, do this. Now we're just being very scrupulous about detailing the maintenance requests, and the way that we send the work orders is with really putting an emphasis on the necessary issues. And so we kind of are pitching the work orders in such a way that I know it responds to the criteria. So I'll give you an example. When we did, how can I say, take 2 of the maintenance request for the handyman. So I sent him the link of the necessary services, and then I wrote him a work order that was, okay, you need to go and plug this hole because of the mice, and we had the exterminator recommend that that be plugged. This is the plumbing issue that needs to be done. This is the stair that needs to be repaired. There's an older resident on the 3rd floor. We've had a complaint from her. It's a security issue. You need to go fix the step. And so because that's all detailed in an email, next time when he runs into someone who's like doing a kind of a control, he's really set up to justify, okay, these are the maintenance issues. It responds to this essential services. Please let me go do my job.
And how's the tenants? How's the tenants are welcoming these people? Are they afraid? Are they keeping their doors shut? Yeah.
Well, like, look, it's a mixed bag. I mean, I think so far I have not had the case where a tenant refused access for maintenance. I mean, really, like, the way we function, and I think the way most landlords function, is that usually the tenant requests you to come and do something. And if they're making a maintenance request, like, usually it's because they want to go into the apartment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So far, I mean, they've been collaborating. And, like, when I don't think I've had a single request for something that's, like, non-essential. Like, the people that requests that I've had was, like, for example, it was legitimate pest control stuff. I did have some plumbing issues. And so those are all things where the tenants are calling me, like, Terry, can you send me someone? And they're actually happy right now when I'm able to send someone. So, yeah, for sure for maintenance. Like, the visits and the rental stuff is really a different ballgame. But definitely for necessary repairs, like, I haven't had anyone with issues. And I'll also say I've been lucky that the people that I work with in terms of maintenance are still going. Because who knows, if things get like a little bit more hairy, it's possible that they just decide to not work anymore. So, you know, that's another whole thing.
Good. And what about the visits? What's going on with the visits?
Yeah, well, so this is really like a bit of an ethical dilemma. And so I'll tell you kind of what our policy has been with people. So we're right now in what's traditionally the height of the Quebec rental season. Because we have tenants that are, most of them who are leaving this year are going to be leaving in July. And right now, owners need to be showing units in order to sign those leases, number one. And the tenants who have given their notice that they're leaving, they need to find places. So it's kind of like both people are in a bit of a double bind here, where the situation and the timing is forcing us to do things that we know it's not a good idea. Okay, we know that, let's say there have been, for example, the real estate board has stopped visits for real estate agents. So there's now an order that real estate agents are not in the thing of sale, right? Mm-hmm. So with that, you can extrapolate that as a landlord, like, probably it's not the best idea to be sending unknown people into a unit that's occupied, right? If the unit is vacant and the person's going to do a visit by themselves with the key, it's one thing. But when we're talking about a unit that has an occupant in it, it's really a bit sketchy to be setting up that situation, because you as the landlord are orchestrating that, right? And, like, imagine you take some action that either contaminates someone who visited one of your units or else brings that into its houses. Like, that's not a great situation. So what we did basically with all of our tenants who had said that they were leaving is we called them up and said, look, we realize you're in a difficult situation because you need to be visiting. We're in a difficult situation because we need to be renting. What about if we just push that out till September? Okay. So what I did is, with the tenants who were on board with that, we just signed like an avenant, which like just another little document that goes along with the lease that says your current lease is prolonged until September 1st. And you register your departure date as September 1st, and we're just going to continue the existing lease with the same conditions until then.
That's a very, very good idea. I think that's one of the best ideas I've heard so far from a property manager, because they, like, putting it in September, it reduced the pressure for everyone. Yeah, you're missing the big season, but what's going to be the big season if we're still like in quarantine?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a very good strategy here. Is the what do you think about, like, we talked about arrangement with the tenants? Do you open the case if you make an arrangement? That's a often question that's a question that comes often. Do you open a case at the regie if you make an arrangement with the tenants still, or you don't? For non-payment.
Are you talking about a payment arrangement or a visit arrangement?
Payment arrangement.
Payment? Okay. Let's just finish with the visits first.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's also just worth mentioning. So we actually have stopped doing visits. I know that there are some, like I have clients who are private owners, and you know, I've told them like what a private owner, a private landlord does and what a business does it's not necessarily the same thing. Okay, I took a position as a management. I don't want to be visits. Even if the tenant agrees to open the door, right now I don't feel like ethically and socially that's the right decision to make. Now, individual landlords, like there has not been an edict from the government that says an individual landlord cannot organize visits of his own unit. But I think I would just like make an appeal to people generally, you know, at this time, like probably the situation is not going to go on for 2 or 3 months. It's probably a question of weeks. And I just think in the interest of making an extra $500 or $600, or in the interest of like having a bit less stress in June, it might not be the best time to be putting people in contact with each other, especially when we don't control all of the different variables. And so my advice would be just sit out a couple of weeks. You know, the situation's evolving so fast right now. 2 weeks from now, it's going to be a completely different situation. Either we're going to begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel, or we're going to be in Spain. Like it's one of those 2 scenarios. And so whichever one it is, you're going to be able to adjust your behavior. And if we end up in Spain or in the US, like in a situation like that, you're going to feel really bad that you made things worse. And if we start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, well then look, like, do you want to be the person who took a risk when there was only 2 weeks until the end of the critical phase in the epidemic? I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, that's true. And what about virtual visits? I've heard some landlord asking, to make some videos.
Yeah.
Did it work for you?
So we had some ads turning for apartments that it's actually interesting because like we had, you know, one ad left on Kijiji that just got left there. And I've had so many requests for visits. So like it's almost difficult to be like, okay, I'm going to do the right thing and not, because my tenant was on board to open the door. I was like, it was a bit difficult for me to be like, okay, we're not going to do that. And then I had people asking for virtual visits. Now, if you have, you know, real estate agent grade technology to do a proper visit of the unit that's really going to give someone a good sense of it, maybe it's a good idea. I'll tell you, I have always had bad experiences with when people don't visit the unit. Okay, so at a certain point, I was doing a lot of rentals to foreign students. So sometimes, like, I would show them the apartment on Skype, or you know, try to give them a sense of that. But what would happen, like, almost 70% of the time, is the person gets there, something in the unit is not exactly how they would have liked. The area is not exactly what they imagined. The building, the neighbors, some variable is not precisely to their liking. And then you end up having an issue where they move in and a week later they're trying to get rid of the lease and cancel it and everything. I just don't want to deal with that. I've had bad experience with when people don't actually physically see the unit and project themselves in it. So you can do it, but at this point, I'm not signing leases based on virtual visits.
That's very wise. So back to our payments. Are we done with the visits? Yeah. So back to our payments, arrangements. Do you open a case in the Régie when you have an arrangement or not?
Okay, so let's back up a little bit because I'm not sure like everybody's completely up to date with exactly what's going on. So the Régie right now is closed, so they're not hearing new cases. We don't know exactly when they're going to open up to hear new cases, but from what I've seen, you can still, like online, you can still open a case. We've actually, our bailiff is still working. Right now, it's actually interesting. So Canada Post now doesn't take signatures, I don't think, when the person goes to the house, okay? So imagine you want to have a registered letter delivered. It's a bit complicated because the person might not go to the pharmacy to pick it up, and there's an issue with the signatures now. Okay, so, but the bailiffs are still working, and if you need to deliver some kind of avis or something by bailiffs, that process is still working. So you can open a case at the Régie, print out your file, and have the bailiff deliver it. So that it's still working.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. As far as payment arrangements go, so I'll tell you how I imagine this situation playing out. So right now, you basically, as a landlord, you have no real leverage to force your tenant to pay, even if you know that they're able, like that they're not one of the people who's directly affected by this, you basically have no leverage over that because the regie is closed. And so even if you open a file today, it's not going to be heard until far later. But so what I would say is, for people who they really justify to you what their situation is, I want a written payment agreement. Okay. And so for people who, like, for example, my 3 young French kids who are all working in restaurants, like for me, I want them to put a payment arrangement on file. I want them to update me when they've done their unemployment requests. I want to be kept up to date on the steps. And if they give me a coherent plan that I can buy into, I'm going to let that play out. Okay, there are people who are talking to me now about defaulting on April. It means that they're already thinking about that, right? And they're already like making a plan, and they're like, okay, on April 6th, we're going to get more information. And so those kind of people, I'm not going to start raising the volume on them right away. However, the tenants who I feel are taking advantage of the situation, I'm going to document the way in which they communicated with me. I'm going to open all my regie files unless it's someone who, like, I feel like they've made a good case for the fact that they need an arrangement and they put an arrangement on paper that we agreed to. Everybody else is going to the regie normally. And as if it was a normal time. And then what I'm going to wait for is, as like we move forward, like what's going to happen is in 3-4 months from now, the regie is going to open and we're going to be sitting there with all the non-payment cases. And then the judge is going to look at the tenant and say, okay, you are this far in arrears on your rent. Here's the payment plan I can propose to you. To me, why you couldn't pay your rent. And so that person is going to have to come in and have a coherent story with paperwork and with different stuff. You know, if you go to the regie, like the judge there doesn't just take people's word for things. They act to document, okay, what is this? What is this? What is this? What efforts did you make to pay? Could you get money from here? Did you explore this option? Da 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 da. And like my sense is that the tenants who are looking for an excuse are not going to be preparing their file properly for that day.
Probably not. Probably not. There was a question from the live that was saying, Aligny, I don't remember exactly the name of that credit check because I don't use it. Aligny Thibodeau, I think.
Thibodeau.
Yeah, is that? Yeah, that's the one. Is closed. So are you operating another one credit check? Which one are you using as a credit check?
Yeah. So no, I actually have my real estate broker's license. So I have an access through an independent credit verification. So I don't use, like, I know for independent landlords, they have to either use Ogilvy Thibodeau or they have to use, what's it called? Like La Corpic or something.
Yeah.
We don't use that because, like, I have my own license to do credit checks on people. But what I would recommend is there are third-party sites. I actually have a blog article on this on my personal website. So on terrieschauer.com. If you look at, there's a blog article on credit checks, and there are very good third-party sites, which it's actually very interesting. So the tenant logs in and then pays for their own credit report and shares the data with you.
Okay.
Okay, so, and it's actually like there's a couple of advantages to this. The first one is it takes no hit on their credit score, because when, let's say, I do a credit check on someone, I think I dock them like 3 or 4 points on their credit. Because the person is requesting their own credit and sharing it with you, they lose no points on their credit score. And you as the landlord, it actually devolves the cost of that to the tenant, because the tenant then has to pay the third-party site to share the report with you.
Okay, very interesting. Which site is that? It all the information on your website?
Yeah, I don't remember it off the top of my head. But the link is there on the website in the blog article.
Okay. I know that, by the way, I know that the Corpic is still open, so they're still doing background check. And if you don't want to use the bailiff also, I use that a lot from like Corpic, or there's other services like it's called ProNotif, which is an email that the tenant receive, obviously if they have an email address, and it's considered as a proof of delivery. So if you want to use these systems, they're pretty cool. All right, so there was another question before we move on to another subject. Do you approach your tenants in advance for potential arrangement, or wait till they are late and don't pay?
Yeah, definitely wait. Like right now, because the thing is, I don't want to create the impression that we're allowing people to not pay. And I had a think about this, especially with my commercial tenants, where I was considering, am I gonna spam out an email and say, look, we're aware things are difficult, da 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 da. We're because basically, like, I run a business center, so we have like a bunch of independent tenants who rent like furnished units, and so my cleaning guy is still going. He's disinfecting everything, and I thought at one point, should I send an email just to inform them of the protocols to follow and this and that stuff? And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna not do that because I don't want to create the impression that we're open to that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I want to put the burden onto the tenants to either pick up the phone and call me and be like, Terrie, I have a problem, or else if they just decide to not pay their rent, in that case, around the 10th, maybe we're going to start picking up the phone and following up with them. But I want to put the burden of handling that situation in their responsibility. I don't want to bring it onto me, because I feel like that's going to create an impression that it's okay to not pay.
Yeah, that's true. And you have buildings yourself. Are you going to use the deferred payments or not from the institution?
Yes. Well, I mean, look, the short answer is I don't know, because I don't know at this point. I don't know what percentage of my rents are going to be delinquent. If I have a 5% to 10% delinquency rate, I'm going to be able to ride that out for a couple of months. Mm-hmm. If I have 50% of people who are not paying, then I'm going to have an issue, and I'm going to have to start talking to, I own a number of buildings, and they're not all at the same bank. They're not all with the same thing. So I might have to make an arrangement for property or another. But really, I need to see how it develops. I don't have a game plan right now, because I have no idea what my delinquency rate's going to be.
What's your, with your crystal ball again? What do you think is going to be the real estate markets in the few months?
That's a really good question. So, I've been watching some of the other people that you interviewed and listened to them, weigh in on that issue. And I really liked Patrice Ménard's analysis of that situation. And I think he's quite right. I think we're in for a difficult 2 or 3 months as landlords. I think that there are going to be opportunities now for people who want to seize them. And I think that there's going to be kind of a pent-up energy, let's say, that falls once this crisis is past us, I think. But I think the other factor that maybe, is going to weigh on what ends up happening is, as far as like an international downturn, I think Canada and Quebec, when I look at what our governments are doing, I'm so glad and so proud that we're here instead of somewhere else. Okay. And but seriously,
south of the border.
No. When I look at what Trump is doing, it's like a humanitarian disaster. He's going to be single-handedly responsible for I don't know how many deaths. And when you then look at what the U.S. is heading into, how long is it going to take for the U.S. economy to bounce back? We have no idea. Mm-hmm. We have no idea. And I think the real issue is not so much, locally. I think Canada is going to get back on its feet relatively quickly. I think we're tracking to do, a bit of a Germany here. And I'm optimistic about how we're going to get through this. But, in terms of the U.S. economy, in terms of the travel sector, and when tourism and that whole travel industry is going to be back up and running, I think we're looking at a year on that. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't have the statistics to know exactly what the segment of the Canadian economy that represents, but it's big, because it's not just the flight attendants, right? It's everybody who works in aerospace, which in Montreal, there's a certain amount of exposure to do with that. You have let's say Bombardier or Airbus has issues and starts doing thousands of layoffs, which realistically that might be coming down 3 months from now. I think there's going to be an effect of a global economic slump that's not going to resolve itself in the next 3 months.
I don't think so. I think it's, how I see things, I think it's going to be an interesting balance on the investing side, is that if there's a lot of non-payments, there's going to be a lot of opportunities. So in each ways, I win. So either way, I win. So if there's a lot of non-payment, well, I'm going to have difficulty managing my units and my building. I'm going to be cash flow. I'm going to have some cash flow problems. But on the other side, a lot of owners are going to have cash flow problem as well. So there's going to be opportunities to look and to buy with other investors. So like, this is the way I see it. Look, it's a win on both sides.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I agree with you. I think, and I agree with Patrice's assessment that for people who are going to behave like professionals in the current market, I think there are going to be good opportunities. Mm-hmm. But in terms of what the outlook is for the market in general, I'm not sure that I believe that we're going to completely bounce back to where we were 3 months from now. I think it's going to be a longer downturn, and I think that that's going to take buyers out. And I think for prices, that's going to be a good thing if you're buying and you're not afraid to act in that kind of environment. I think that's going to be like a good thing for you as a buyer, as an investor who's looking to acquire more properties. But I think generally speaking, like, you know, in an economic downturn, there's a lot of different factors that come on. Like, sure, we want to acquire more buildings, but then you have to pay your own more. You have to, if you have a day job, you're going to be concerned about your own day job. Like, there's all kinds of different factors that come into it.
That's true, but that was very selfish of me. This is the way I see it, as a selfish, like, real estate investor that wants to buy, because at one point I was like, okay, because I got about 10 commercial spaces, which are to me much more scarier than the other residential unit, and I was thinking, I was like, okay, see it a good way. I mean, if there's problem with the industry, it means that there's going to be good opportunities as well, because there's going to be struggling homeowners, and not homeowners, but building owners also. Very interesting times to come. Terrie, any last words before we finish with this live?
Yeah, I mean, if we just, you know, if I kind of say bounce off the fact of, you know, how can, because one thing is the nuts and bolts of this, the technical aspect of how do we handle the fact that we were in a bit of an uncertain period, how do we deal with non-payments, how do we, you know, like there's really the technical nuts and bolts of landlording right now. And I think there's also, you know, the mindfulness and the mindset part of this, which is like, we've not situation like this in our lives, you know, where we're confined, we're at home with our families, we have like uncertainties that are economic, but we also have uncertainties that might affect our loved ones or different things like that. And I think it's, you know, a time when people are feeling quite anxious and where there's just a lot of fear. And I think on the one hand, you know, you got to sort of take a look at how this is going to affect your business. And, you know, I've been doing that, let's say at home with my husband or on the phone with my parents, and like just going through this thing and discussions of like, look, okay, what's the most probable scenario? Like, of course, we can get sucked into some kind of catastrophizing. Oh, what happens if all the tenants don't pay? What happens if da 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 da? No, build a most probable scenario and then govern yourself according to that. And I think that goes in business as much as for, you know, what we might be feeling in our personal lives at the moment, you know, and that I think it's important to make plans business wise, but it's also important to like manage whatever your, you know, discomfort or anxiety might be personally in this situation. And I know, you know, for me, I'm a really active person. I train a lot, and usually like I teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. And so for me, making sure that every single day I'm either doing a workout in the basement or like getting out for a run or just doing something to like be away from my kid, stop, you know, off of mommy time, not frantically answering emails or trying to make phone calls with my kids bouncing on my head. You know, just do whatever it is you need to do that is gonna bring the whole thing down. And like I've started now, I don't watch the news every night. You know, I if I want specific information, I'm gonna Google it, or like maybe I'm gonna watch one thing every 2 or 3 days, but I'm like definitely not sitting there watching news because it's stuff gets into your head a little bit. So
yeah, that's totally true. I mean, we need some time off from the news because everybody's like 24 hours a day on the news, and I mean, it's not something that moves really fast. I mean, it's something that, like, I think once a day is enough for the news. I think so.
No, absolutely, and I think like there's a fine line between, you know, it's important to stay informed and to understand what's going on. And then there's also an aspect of like, you know, where you're watching a car crash, right? And I think at a certain point, you got to limit it and be like, look, how is this serving my life right now? and how am I chasing an ambulance? You know, and that like that might give you short-term gratification of like, oh, what's going on with the COVID crisis, but at the same time, like that is kind of polluting your mind with a bunch of stuff that maybe right now it's better to focus on the stuff that you can control. So your own health, your diet, your as yes, your business, if that's interesting to you and it's not creating a lot of anxiety, you know, focus on things that you have control over. What you put in your mouth, how many push-ups you do, how many kilometers you run, whatever it is, you know, like if you can make tangible goals and follow through on those, I think it's a good way to see things advancing, even though we have a sense that things are at a standstill. So
things also that you've never had time to do for your business as well. That's what I'm doing right now as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah, me too.
Yeah,
me too. We're actually switching our management software.
Yeah.
And we're doing like all kinds of stuff that like virtually you can do, because we just don't like right now we're not being solicited as much as usual. So
what's the system? There was a question on the chat also. What's the system you're using now?
Yeah, so we were using an American software called Buildium, which I was quite happy with, and we're now switching to Magex, so Proprio Expert, because we need the American was really great, but like we needed now the accounting functions, and the American accounting system just didn't work. So.
Yeah, it's a very good software. There's actually managing more than 50,000 units. This system, Magex in Quebec, so very, very popular system. Yeah. So Terrie, thank you for joining us today. I'll let you go back to your
mommying.
Yeah, mommying, yeah, and for doing push-ups and jiu-jitsu. Yeah. On our side, on the real estate investor side, be sure to, well, if you did like the content, you can share it, or on the webpage. Next week, we're going to have more interviews like these every time at noon. We're going to have try to have some investors for next week. And on the French side, on the Club d'Investisseurs Immobiliers, also live events coming up. So we're going to have Airbnb and Luc Poirier as well, very successful investors on Friday. Airbnb is going to be Thursday. Airbnb, there's a lot of things happening with the short-term rental right now. So on the French side on Thursday. Other than that, just to let you know, activities are continuing. We're moving on for online training as well in both the Real Estate Investors Club and the Club d'Investisseurs Immobiliers. So if you want to keep yourself educated and be on the ball, we're still there for you. So again, Terrie, thank you, and I apologize for the late live. We had some difficulty with Facebook. Can you imagine it? And I apologize also for the sound was not as good as it usually is, but we did make it work, so that's the important stuff. So, Terrie, thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, have a good day.